If you're sick and tired of that small screen in your BMW, then you'll want to see how you can easily go from this to this. What's up everybody, my name is Fritz and welcome to the channel. If your BMW didn't come equipped with navigation, then unfortunately you're also stuck with that smaller screen. And unless you feel like paying thousands of dollars to BMW for that upgrade, perhaps this bigger screen with navigation included will solve all your problems. We'll even code it in at the end of the video. The best thing about this kit is that it's completely reversible because the entire kit is plug and play. The box contains everything we need to spec out this upgrade, including the bigger 10.25-inch screen, lower bracket, main wire harness, a straight connection LVDS cable, GPS antenna, 4G antenna, aux cable, USB-A connections, USB to aux connection, and additional connections for other peripherals. When we bring in the car, we need to disconnect the battery that is under the cowl in the engine bay. To get to it, we need to remove the weather stripping and two push rivets holding in the cowl. With those removed, we can lift off the cowl to reveal the battery. Loosen the negative terminal with a 10mm and place something like a towel in between the lead and wire so they don't touch. Since the hood will be open for a while, let's also lock it into place. Jumping inside, we'll need a plastic trim tool to pry off the two panels with the lower one going first. If these trims have never been removed before, it will be extremely stiff. So just pry along the entire edge a few times, never putting too much pressure in one area, but do increase pressure with each pass. Eventually it will pop out to reveal the three wires we have to remove. The first one at the top has two lateral locking tabs we need to push in before removing the connection. The bottom two can be removed with a plastic trim tool or by hand. With that out of the way, we can move up to the top trim, which will attack from the passenger vent. Once that section has opened up, it does not require much force to remove the other tabs. On this piece, we have two sets of wires, one for the ambient lighting and the other for the lock switch and hazard lights. The second one can be easily removed by pushing up on the bottom locking mechanism while slightly tugging on the wire. With both trim pieces out, we have full access to the four T20s holding in the screen and head unit. After doing a few of these screens, I can honestly say these screws always seem to fall and get lost. So do yourself a favor and have a magnetic tool nearby. Now we can lift out the screen and turn it over. The connection has one locking tab that needs to be pushed in as we pull out the cable. We also have to swap out the lower trim. Just use your trim tool to lift up on the tabs holding in the trim, but be careful of the rear pins, which are the thinnest. With the original screen out, we can easily see how much of an upgrade the 10.25-inch screen is, not only in its additional functionalities, but also the screen real estate for things like maps. First, we need to swap over the retaining clips from our old lower trim to the new one. I just use a small pry bar to loosen up the teeth and walk the clip off. If you plan on reselling or putting back in the old screen in the future, just take your time here, as you don't want the plastic tabs to break. Once you've unseated the teeth, it will walk off with a few alternating lifts, and in some cases, you get lucky. Once they're all in, it should drop in just like OEM, with all the alignment and locking tabs lining up perfectly. Moving on to the actual head unit, unlock and release the main wiring harness, and look to see if you have a fiber optic cable. If you do, remember its location and remove it. These plastics can be brittle, so I used a pick tool to lift up on the bigger locking section as I pulled out the cable. Our main bypass harness from the box will now connect to the original wiring harness. As you pull the locking collar into place, you'll feel some resistance, but if it starts to bind, go ahead and remove it and then realign the two pieces, then try again. Plug in the fiber optic cable in the same position, in our case was on the outermost side. And now we should be able to join the bypass harness to the head unit with the locking collar. Then route up the section of the bypass harness with the white end to the top, as it will plug directly into the new screen and make sure to give yourself some extra slack. Next up is our USB cables that will go under and behind the head unit to join the previous set of cables at the top. And this one will be a little bit more challenging as we have less space to feed those wires through. Now this next part does require some patience, as we have to slide back in the head unit as we maneuver the big connections of the wire harness downward and out of the way. Once it seats in, secure it loosely with the two T20s so we have some room to maneuver the cables at the top. At this time you can connect your phone cable to the USB, as well as the aux cable if you want. The 4G antenna can go directly in front of and below the vent, as this needs a direct connection to the screen also, just like the GPS antenna that will go in between the vents. Of course, there's enough cable slack to mount both of these on the dash for the best signal, but in my experience, having them hidden here has not greatly impacted either antenna's ability to pick up signals. However, it does make for a much cleaner look. Lastly, we have the optical AV cables that don't need to be installed if you don't plan on hooking up other peripherals. Finally, we can bring in the screen that, if you want to install a SIM card or SD card, now would be the best time. Then plug in the wires. The best way to do this is to start at the middle with the USB and AV connections, then the top connection for the bypass harness, and each one has a dedicated slot with the locking tab facing upward. Let's follow that up with our GPS cable that snaps in, while the 4G one screws into place. The last cable to be connected is our LVDS cable that has the least amount of slack. Let this wire run in between the three middle cables and the screen. This should give you enough space to line it up and comfortably push it in. Doing it this way will also ensure that we have enough slack to flip the screen over and lower it into place. And don't worry about screwing it in for now as long as it sits flush. At this moment, reconnect the battery and make sure the screen is working. The normal iDrive screen should pop up with this weird interface taking up about half of the space. Just see if all your controls are working as intended, and you can get to the Android portion of the screen by holding down the menu button. You'll also find that the Android portion can also be controlled by the iDrive controller. To switch back, hold down the menu button again. If all checks out, turn off the car and disconnect the battery again. And now we can secure in those T20s, which I would still use the magnetic tool for, as the screws holding in the screen are harder to get to and to secure into place. I would also do this part by hand, as the tightening force of power tools might be too much here, and hand tight is more than enough to keep them in place. The top trim goes in first, and this is the one that had the ambient lighting connection as well as the lock and hazard lights. Then line up the tabs and press it in. The bottom trim had 3 connections, all of which have their own distinctive harnesses. Then align the 3 top pins to the respective receivers and press it in. Just make sure you can fish out your phone cable once it's in. Here's how this one will always have enough slack while staying out of the way. Just fold it into the crease, and when you need it, simply pull it out. Time to code the screen. Reconnect the battery and tighten down the 10mm before hooking it up to a battery tender. This way we'll have constant power during the coding process without unnecessary stress on the battery. Here we'll be using an OBD2 Bluetooth adapter along with Bimmer code. Inside the app, select your chassis, in this case the X1. Then go into the head unit section and toggle into expert mode. The first of 4 codes we'll address is the display size resolution. For this screen, we want to select the 10.25 1280 by 480 option. Go back and select Display Variante and select the Britas display. Third is CID Display Res, and we want the 1280 480 selection to match our first code. Last is CID Display Size, which we want to select the 10_25 option. Once those 4 have been changed, hit code, and during this time, the car will reset, and you may be met with an error message and a few warning chimes, but they'll go away once the process is complete. Once it's finished, disconnect from Bimmer code and remove your dongle. You may also notice your screen looks even worse than before, and that's because we have one more setting to adjust on the actual screen. Flip over to the Android side and go into Settings followed by Factory. The code for this brand is 2018. Now go to Car Display, and even though this is a 10.25-inch screen, we want to select the proper chassis with the closest screen size. Finally, you can jump over to the iDrive section to confirm you have the full screen functionality. If everything looks good, you can disconnect your tender and place back on your cowl and weather stripping. Just keep in mind that this screen adds a whole bunch of new functions to your car that might take some time to get used to. But if there's a specific setting or feature you want to see, then you'll want to check out this video that goes through all the settings and functions that this new screen has to offer. And I'll see you in that one.